How would you describe the relations between Western signal intelligence organizations like the FRA, like the GCHQ, and the NSA?
The relationships historically have been very close. The you have to understand that in the intelligence business, you make your friends where you can, and in the case of Scandinavia, especially Sweden, the relationship with the FRA, especially immediately after the end of World War II and continuing into the 1960s, was very close because we, the United States, knew nothing about what was going on inside the Soviet Union. The FRA had much better access, had been working on Soviet codes and ciphers much longer than the United States had. And so we were so desperate for information that we reached out to the Swedish Defense Intelligence staff and basically begged for whatever information we could get, beginning in 1946, and the relationship continued on until the 1960s, when suddenly the United States put into space these new spy satellites, which gave us these wonderful pictures and also allowed us to listen to Soviet radio traffic and radars deep inside the Soviet Union. Suddenly we didn't need Sweden anymore.
So how do you describe the relationship between the FRA and the NSA between the 60s and then?
Well, the relationship continued, but at a very, what I would call a modest level. It was not as intense as it was in the 1940s and 1950s. There have been reports that we helped Sweden purchase equipment that went on to the spy planes that Sweden flies, and the Orion, the spy ship that Sweden operates or used to operate in the Baltic. It's been replaced. The relationship remained basically at a modest level until a man named Admiral Bobby Inman, who became later the director of the National Security Agency, became the naval attaché in Stockholm in the 1960s, and he said, "But the Swedes are wonderful. They really want to work with us." And so the relationship began again. And Admiral Inman supplied the Swedish intelligence community with money and lots of information which the Swedes had not been given access to before. And then 9/11 happened.
What happened to the relationship after that?
The relationship after 9/11 exploded in the sense that suddenly Sweden and all of the Scandinavian countries once again became incredibly important. You have to understand that after the fall of the Soviet Union the Berlin Wall collapses in 1989, the Soviet Union falls apart in 1991, and suddenly we didn't need Sweden anymore. There was no main target for us to cooperate with Sweden. 10 years later, the terrorist attacks here in the United States changed the equation dramatically. We suddenly needed, as part of the global war on terrorism, to use the term that the Bush administration calls it by, we needed the cooperation of as many friendly intelligence agencies as we could get. And the Swedish intelligence community has an excellent reputation for counterterrorism, which may explain why there haven't been many terrorist attacks in Sweden over the many years. The Swedes maintain very good diplomatic relations in parts of the world where the United States has no relations whatsoever. So we needed any information we could get from wherever it could come from. And for since 9/11, the relationship between the Swedish intelligence community and the American community has become very intimate on many different levels, not just terrorism, because the war in Afghanistan. You have Swedish troops in the north of the country, and so there has to be information sharing between the United States and the Swedish military in Kabul or at Bagram Air Base, where the Swedes are located, for intelligence exchange. Insofar as Iraq is concerned, the Swedish government obviously provides humanitarian aid and other forms of assistance in Iraq, so there's a great deal of interest in both countries on what's going on inside Iraq. Sweden's interests are the same as the United States. It's global. Sweden is a major peacekeeping provider around the world, and oftentimes there are no American troops taking part in those operations. We cooperated during the war in Bosnia, and in Kosovo, where Sweden participated very, very closely. So, I mean, our relationship with the Swedish intelligence community has become progressively closer over the, especially since the war in Bosnia in the mid-1990s. That was the first time the U.S. intelligence community had ever worked intimately with a joint force of Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, and Finnish intelligence officers, despite the fact that Finland is not a member of NATO. And, of course, Sweden is not either. So,
how would you describe the FRA-NSA relationship today?
I don't think it's very close. I mean, I'm sure at the government-to-government level there is sharing of information obtained by signals intelligence, but in terms of actual liaison, there's no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no NSA personnel at Leuven, where the FRA's headquarters is located, and by the same token, I don't think Swedish defense attaches here in Washington are allowed to go up to Fort Meade, where NSA is headquartered. But the governments may share the information that NSA or the FRA collect. How much, we do not know.